Hello, Year 3. I hope you've all had a really great week. It's definitely been a lot cooler this week, which has been better for all the children in school, and we've enjoyed spending lots of time outside. There hasn't been too much rain either, which is good. I've been really impressed again with your spellings in particular this week, and I'd like to say big well done for that, and please carry on practicing your spellings even over the holidays when we get there, because it will help you all to be ready for when you move up to be with Mrs. Micklethwaite and Miss Katescu in year 4. I hope you've enjoyed the maths and English lessons as well, being slightly different. From the children I've seen in school, they've said they've really enjoyed the lessons, and it's been useful having a teacher virtually helping them as well. So you will have similar sort of lessons next week as well. And then for the last week of term, you'll have some lessons on Purple Mash. Now, I'm going to read the next chapter in The Hen Who Wouldn't Give Up. We won't finish this all in our videos, but what I'm thinking of doing is when and if you come in for your transition visits, I'm hoping to pop in and see you all. So I'll try and finish reading the story to you then. So the chapter we are now on is called Hilda Goes Out to Tea. All the farmyard came to see Hilda off again the next day. They teased her a bit, but she did not mind. She squeezed under the gate and turned to say goodbye. You be careful now, my girl, said old Flo. Watch where you're putting your feet, and do try not to choose anything smelly, pleaded Clarissa. You wait, I shall smell lovely this time, said Hilda. Goodbye now. Goodbye, Hilda. Good luck, they called after her. Hilda was luckier this morning. At least she thought she was. There was something parked outside the very first row of cottages. It was a little red and white motor scooter. It was very small, but it had a double saddle, and there would be room for Hilda on that. Under the saddle was a big card with L written on it, but Hilda did not know what that meant. The proud owner came out of one of the cottages at that moment. It was Miss Smith, the teacher from Little Dollop School. She was wearing an enormous crash helmet. She sat gingerly on the side saddle and began to kick at the starter. Hilda, who had hidden by the hedge until Miss Smith was safely mounted, now crept forward and hopped up onto the saddle. Miss Smith was much too busy to notice her. This was the very first time she had taken a scooter on the road. She had practised a bit in the garden, and that was about all. She kicked the starter a little harder, and suddenly the engine burst into life. The scooter made 2 leaps forward like a learner kangaroo, and then shot off in a cloud of smoke with Miss Smith and Hilda hanging on for dear life. In fact, it would be hard to say who was the more frightened, Hilda or Miss Smith herself. Miss Smith was finding it very difficult to steer. They zigzagged along, 1 minute careering down the middle of the road, the next heading straight for the ditch. Hilda closed her eyes. She could not bear to look. They also wobbled. Poor Miss Smith, the more she wobbled, the more she zigzagged, and the more she zigzagged, the more she wobbled. For Hilda it was like being in a small boat on a rough sea. She began to feel seasick. Round the next bend was a bumpy bit of road. They began to bounce. It was too much for Hilda. At the second bounce she opened her beak and let out a loud squawk. That was too much for Miss Smith. What was crouching behind her? She wobbled violently, lost control, and drove straight through the hedge. Luckily, they were passing Journey's End Farm at the time, and their journey ended in the middle of a haystack. When Hilda picked herself up, she felt a bit giddy and stupid, and she still had her eyes tight shut. When she realised that at last she was on firm ground again, no more jogging and bouncing, she felt brave enough to open her eyes. There was a strange mushroom thing wriggling on the ground by the fallen scooter. It was poor Miss Smith. Her helmet was jammed right down to her chin, and she was wrestling with it to get it off. Hilda thought that this must be a good moment to disappear. She had tiptoed away only a few yards, with a sound like a popping cork. Miss Smith emerged from her helmet. She saw Hilda. "A hen!" she gasped. "Only a hen? Oh, you did frighten me. Come here. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. What were you doing on my scooter?" Hilda hung her head. Her feathers were still all ruffled, and bits of hay and chaff were stuck all over her. Miss Smith looked down at herself. She was just as bad. "Well, don't just stand there," she said. "We must help each other to tidy up." So Hilda, who had decided that Miss Smith's bark was worse than her bite, came over and started to peck the bits of straw from Miss Smith's jumper, while Miss Smith picked Hilda's feathers clean. As they worked, Miss Smith gave Hilda a lecture. Now, Miss Hen, I hope you've learned your lesson. Never take a ride on something without asking first. If I'd have known you were there, this accident would never have happened. If you want somebody to give you a lift, you must stand by the road and hold your claw up like this." Miss Smith held up her fist and pointed her thumb down the road. "You see, it's called hitchhiking, and all the drivers understand it. You point your thumb, all right, claw, in the direction in which you want to go, and if the driver has the time, he will stop and pick you up. You understand?" Hilda nodded. If only she had known before. Tomorrow she would try it. "Well," said Miss Smith, standing up and brushing down her skirt, "I think we'll do now. My scooter seems to be all right. I'll give you a lift home if you like." Hilda didn't like. She was not going through all that again. She backed away. "It's all right," said Miss Smith, laughing. "I think I've had enough for one day too. I shall push it home." That was different. Hilda waited while Miss Smith righted the scooter, and then she hopped up on the back again. They had a pleasant journey home. Hilda liked Miss Smith. When they reached her cottage, Miss Smith propped her scooter against the fence. "Here we are," she said. "Oh, I'm dying for a cup of tea." Hilda hopped down and looked hopefully at Miss Smith. Miss Smith was a very understanding person. "You must be thirsty too, Miss Hen. Would you care to join me for a cup of tea?" Hilda had never been invited out to tea before. She followed Miss Smith into her kitchen. Miss Smith put the kettle on and then looked down at Hilda. "I don't expect tea is much good to you, is it? Let me see what I can find." Hilda liked what she found. Miss Smith brought her a cup of water, some porridge, oats, and how could Miss Smith have known? Some cornflakes. Hilda decided she liked going out to tea. "Well, you're a very tidy eater, I must say," said Miss Smith, looking at her clean kitchen floor when Hilda had finished. She hadn't left a crumb. "You must come again one day." Miss Smith saw Hilda to the door. "I hope you know your way home from here, Miss Hen. Well, goodbye. Remember what I told you. Ask next time. Goodbye." Hilda went down the path and out of the front gate. She paused for a few minutes to leave something for Miss Smith in her upturned crash helmet, and then made for little Dollop on the farm. When she reached the gate, everyone rushed to welcome her. "Hilda, did you get to much Wallop?" "No, I'm afraid not, but I've been to tea with Miss Smith, the school teacher." "You haven't!" They couldn't believe it. Hilda told them all about it. Then old Flo came up and sniffed her. "Well, I never! She smells lovely." "Come and smell her, girls." They gathered round and sniffed cautiously. Hilda smelled faintly of Miss Smith's lavender water. "I told you I would come home smelling nice," she said. So next week we'll find out what happens when Hilda goes hitchhiking. So have a great weekend, everybody. Keep working really, really hard. Try your best, but remember to ask for help if you need it. Keep going on Purple Mash. I have been emailing people. Keep up with Times Table Rockstars. I will set up another competition as well tomorrow. So remember to send in any photographs of any home learning you do as well. See you all next week.